All right. So let's get started with part 2. Obviously, still talking about the final exam. Right. Of course, still talking about Revit, and we are in week 14, if you can believe it. We've made it, guys. Either way, obviously, no Thanksgiving class, right? Obviously, enjoy Thursday's break, and of course, no classes on Friday, even though we don't meet on Friday. But just to recap a little bit, last time we talked about essentially the UI. We talked about the tabs, the architecture, structures, steel, precast systems, insert, annotate, and we're definitely going to dive much more into that today. We reviewed the properties bar and how it's ever changing no matter what we click on, whether it be literally the viewport that we're in or simply clicking on a wall, that the properties tab definitely changes every single time, and that it's pretty much aware. So if you have multiple things selected, yeah, it will only show matching properties of those things selected. And as you can see with all these different things I've selected, they have literally nothing in common. So there's that. However, on the side, we also got familiar with the project browser, and we immediately noticed that everything is kind of connected in this program, right? Of course, BIM modeling software standing for Building Information Modeling. So the entire idea was to have one cohesive model that essentially everybody could open, whether it was the MEP engineer or the architect or the civil engineer, that they all essentially saw the same changes, which is a really big deal. I don't know about you, but I started working for a firm in 2009, and they were still working in AutoCAD, and one of my first jobs was literally to check and make sure that all the sheets made sense, right? That were coming from the MEP, that were coming from the engineer, and literally check the drawings. Hey, do we have the same dimensions as the same floor plan? And often than not, I can't express this enough, my job was super important because I found that, well, that engineer had an old version of the design iteration. He had an old version, and he made all of his specifications, all of his pipe work, all of his electrical work, all of his mechanical work based on an old architectural drawing. So when he sent his in to us, we're like, oh shit, we have the wrong stuff. We have literally pipes outside. That's not going to work, right? So as you can see, it caused a lot of fuss. It caused a lot of struggle in communication between firms and different design places, right? Obviously, the interior designs is another one, right? Can you imagine you change the room or you minus a room? And the interior designer thinks that one of those rooms, they start designing maybe even 50 hours on something that doesn't exist anymore. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. And of course, that's why this program was invented, to obviously alleviate some of that discrepancy between communications. Either way, last time we basically started with some walls and some foundation, so we definitely want to continue today. I was also explaining that, of course, in an elevation we have actually different levels, and that we can connect to those levels, right? More or less, I like to do it actually in section. So I have actually all of my levels, and of course I've made that in the template for us. No, you do not have to have a 4-foot story building, and in fact I think I just added this one for the sake of giggles. But for the most part, you'll realize that if you do delete something, it really does delete that view, right? So do keep that in mind. You can't just delete things in this program because it's literally attached to another item. You'll often accidentally delete something in one view and realize, hey, where did it go in the other view? Well, you deleted it. All the views are not... The views are really just what's showing you of the one model, right? It's not separate models. And just like Rhino, we can make multiple copies. Can't do that in Revit. In fact, it doesn't want that at all. Revit is for constructing a building, and guess what you're not doing in Studio usually? Constructing a building. So even though a lot of students think they are, they're not. Anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple stories. I think I'm going to go with actually, second floor, third floor, fourth floor today, just for giggles, just for showing you how to, of course, use the program. In my case, I'm going to hit DI because I like to have dimensions, especially when I'm making construction documents. And it's very nice to see some of these, at least floor to floor ratios. In my case, I'm going to make these a little bit more rounded. So in my case, I'm going to go with like a nice 12-foot floor. Yeah, that's a little pricey, but no budget. In my case, I'm going to go with a second floor that's maybe 10 feet, obviously reducing it. But as you can see, if I type in 10 feet, it immediately went to 10 feet. So in my case, I need to do 10 feet above that, which is 22 feet. So not too bad. I can also just click on the dimension itself and simply change it, right? So clicking on that dimension, you'll see that it highlights into a blue interface. And yeah, you can click on these things, and another thing is you can annotate them as well. And a huge reason why people do like Revit is it's very parametric. Even the dimensions are connected to itself and accounted for. Yes, if you highlight everything and you go to dimensions, it'll tell you exactly how many dimensions, how many stairs, how many feet, how much sheetrock you will need, how much wood you will need for every single component of this building. But again, not useful in studio. Definitely useful at a firm or in construction. But again, setting my levels first could be a big deal. But again, not exactly a studio thing. I mean, how many times are we like, I know exactly how big my floors are? Yeah, me neither. Because usually that's what I'm still doing in studio. That's still what I'm designing. However, for Revit, it wants a completed building. It wants a completed design, which is why, if you guys remember from part 1, I said the first part of this assignment was to sketch it. Nobody should be designing in Revit, especially for their first time using Revit. So again, make sure that you're drawing a sketch first. That way you have something to go by and something to follow, as if Revit was about to make the construction documents for you. However, as you saw last time, we can actually connect our walls to certain situations. So for instance, I can highlight all of these walls. Keep in mind it is a section, so it's not grabbing that one wall that's getting cut out. But in our case, I can give it a top constraint of now say level 4. Now once I do that, it immediately goes to level 4, which is great. And if I move level 4, even better, my walls still stick to those things. So again, a very parametric device, but as you can see, it didn't grab anything that I didn't grab, of course, in that view. So in my case, we learned that control was in order to get some of those pieces. In my case, I want the exterior walls to go up to the 4th level, and my interior walls can stay relatively on the inside. I want to make a new floor, so in my case I can fake it till I make it actually, and take the previous floor that I've already made. I'll go back to my section view and simply hit CC. Why CC? Well, that's just the command for copy. If I do CC and immediately click somewhere, yes, you can make a copy. And what's great is you can make unlimited copies, right? So yeah, you can make a couple new floors. In my case, I'm going to actually add a roof to the 4th floor, so I'm not going to get too fancy with the spices there. But as you can see, I have some pretty thick floors going on, and that's actually pretty typical. A 24-inch floor is pretty typical of a house. Actually, most cookie cutter houses go for 18 inches, right? And they really try and shove a lot of structure and mechanical in there, and it's usually a mess. Have you ever tried to change a light on your 1st floor if you have a 2nd-story house? Yeah, good luck. You're probably calling somebody or just cutting open your roof. Anyway, not to get too much into the minutia, but we have some levels, and as you can see, as soon as we made those levels, yeah, our model's immediately updated. I don't know about you, but I hate going back and forth between my section model. So one thing that we can do in this view that is pretty spiffy, and to be completely honest, I'm not sure what I did with my topography. I may have accidentally deleted it. Happens a lot when you delete something, by the way. It's not a good idea to delete things in Revit, by the way. However, as you remember, something that we did in part 1, we chose the topo surface, but we didn't just choose any topo surface. We of course clicked down and create from import. So I will do it really fast without talking. So in my case, I do want to go ahead and make one. So there is the layer that I'm talking about. Topsoil from import. Oh, I can't use that work plane. I get to explain work planes to you. So yes, in the architecture tab, you'll realize that work plane is like our C-plane in Rhinoceros. It can move around and it can move all the time. So in my case, it does have a fancy button in Revit. So you can call it your C-plane, and some honestly do call it still a C-plane, but it is called the work plane, essentially in Revit. In my case, I need to associate it with something. In my case, I'm just going to choose 1st floor, and as you can see, that blue box immediately changed to a 1st floor level. If I change it to 4th floor or my height, I think it was actually set to my roof, so I accidentally deleted my roof level, so it went back to a default position. In my case, I'm just going to set it to a 1st floor and press OK. That way I can simply make a box, or sorry, my topography. So we'll go with topsoil, create from import again. We'll click on my import. Oh, sorry, create from CAD, and of course click on my CAD. I only want my topo lines, so we'll make that really quick. Now, obviously, I need to fix it, but you can refer to part 1 for that fix. I'll fix it in the meantime. Another thing I can do to avoid that being deleted is I can pin it in Revit. So I can click on something and type in pin to pin it, and you'll see immediately this little pin tool comes up, right? A little pen, if you will, literally a push pen, a clear pen, right? And you can lock something into place. That way you can't accidentally move it. In fact, if you accidentally do, usually it will tell you, hey, you pinned this. So if I click on this and I move it, hey, can't move pinned items. That's great. I also can't delete them now, which is like a locking mechanism, if you will. You'll notice you don't have layers anymore in Revit. Everything is a component, a family, or something in between. So often I do pin elements, especially if I want to make sure that I don't want to change them or they get manipulated. So nothing too shabby about that. But as I was saying, I don't want to go back and forth between this section view and these other views, even though I could. In my case, I just actually want a section view in my model, so I can go actually to my main view. I can click on the outside. So it doesn't work if I click on the topography, right? There's nothing that says section view. It's only in the viewport itself. So you'll see that it says section box. Click, and immediately a section box comes about. Now, if you move that with your little blue arrows tool, you'll see that it immediately actually cuts our model, which is kind of a game changer. Again, like clipping plane, but now in a box form. So again, not called clipping plane anymore, but in its box form. Another thing that's nice about this is I can double click and edit something in this view, which is, again, kind of a game changer. I don't have to go back to the floor view. I can basically do that all here. In fact, I can even still use my align tool for all the Brandons out there and do AL, right? And actually flip through what I want to align with, and of course align those things. As soon as I'm done, I can press check mark, and yes, now this is actually more anatomically correct to architecture. No, the floor isn't seen on the outside, and usually the floor goes all the way up and the floor connects to the wall. Again, if you haven't taken Tech 2, it's absolute nonsense to you. Again, reminding you that Revit wants a finished building. If you don't know how to make a finished building, you're probably not ready for Revit yet, right? Anybody know what a fascia board is? Exactly. So you'll realize that a lot of these terms are going to teach you a little bit about architecture, especially in the first 2 years of architecture, and especially at SAC. Again, in the words of Professor Joaquin Escamilla, fake it till you make it, right? So there is that. But obviously, we don't have the wall sticking out unless you do have some sort of platform. I mean, why not? I mean, shoot, that's actually kind of cool. Let's keep it for today. However, it's looking pretty thick, so maybe by the time that we get up to the top, we go for a generic 18-inch, and that's looking a little bit more realistic and appropriate. However, in order to get up to these places and in order to actually use them, we're going to need stairs. So obviously, let's talk about some stairs next. In my case, I'm going to go back to my floor plan for that one, and I'm going to actually go to the floor plan view. So right off the bat, I know we started making some rooms, and don't get me wrong, I'm designing as I go for this tutorial, something that you should not do, so do not practice in this way. But in my case, I do want to make some decisions. In my case, maybe the front door is maybe right here, so maybe I have a platform. Since I'm in my first floor plan, everything that I do in this floor will be applied to that work plane, right? So do keep that in mind, or that C plane, if you will. So in my case, I do want to have, some ideas. So I do want, maybe some sort of porch idea. Maybe I even want to walk up to that porch, which would be really nice. I can immediately change these floors to something like a generic 18-inch. I can move it actually with my arrows if I wanted to give any space to those. And again, I could really lock in the space. I could do DI. And again, very much dimension that exact space. So 2 inches, yeah. And if I wanted that to be even closer, again, I could select these things, click on them, and say 1 inches, and it will immediately move that. However, you'll see that dimensions are really big right now, and that's because I'm at 1A scale. Let's switch that to actually the project, which is 1/4. And you'll see it scaled everything for us. Again, there's some pluses to working in Revit. However, not as great as honestly what we need. But in terms of constructing a building, absolutely. But in my case for studio, not exactly useful, especially if my professor hates my design and I immediately have to change it. I might as well literally start a new Revit model, because changing a Revit model is hilariously evil and fun, and maybe not as much as the emphasis on the second word. But as you can see, I literally have to draw everything, and it really wants everything kind of already set in place. So in my case, this is kind of my front door, if you will. I'm going to do DR for door, and yes, I've loaded some doors for us as well. However, I'm just putting a placeholder because yes, there's actually multiple doors involved, and as you can see, I can immediately switch a door to a different door or everything in between. You'll see that as soon as I make these things, that yes, immediately they make them as well in the 3D model. That is cool, but again, it's for construction drawing. I'll try my best to stop saying that. Anyway. But in my case, as you can see, I can do a couple things, and if I delete things, they don't necessarily work. It obviously trying to stick to my dimension lines. So in my case, I want to give myself a little overhang. So maybe I delete them, maybe I don't. Maybe I just make that a little bit bigger and extend. Definitely not too shabby there. Right. Have a little awning, but that's looking super thick, and I don't necessarily want to change maybe necessarily my floor. So I don't know, maybe I don't use the floor necessarily for that. And as you can see, I need to push some of my floors outside of the wall. Again, fake it till you make it. But if I did want an awning, I am actually going to need to make a roof. So we'll talk about that when we get to roofs. In my case, as you can see, these are wildly out of the floor. So in my case, I would select those and basically reduce them, maybe not by 3 feet, right? Maybe I'd want to put that to 0 feet. That way they're actually at the floor. Yes, it's going to be inside my topography, I get that. And or just disappear completely. As you see, my floor is actually arguably not at 0 either. So there is that. But as you can see, definitely not too shabby so far. We can actually click on this view as well if we need to rotate or maneuver ourselves. That's not looking too shabby, at least for a front door. As you can see, I have the dirt going literally into my place, so I'm gonna fake it till I make it for now and just actually move that down. It doesn't want me to do that. Why? Because it's pinned. So I do need to unpin it first, or do UP for unpin, and basically just move it down a little bit, making a little bit more sense and being a little bit more realistic to, say, quote-unquote architecture and in terms of a studio-esque building. But that's looking pretty sweet so far. Let's keep going. Go with my floor plan, not my sheet, my floor plan view. All right, there we go. So I am making some stairs and making some doors everywhere in between. So maybe I have a room here or a kitchen. Maybe I have another door there. Keep in mind that everything is a family. Everything's a component. So don't get me wrong, a door is and also can be a pocket door. It can also be a single flush door. It can also be a glass door. And in my case, I've actually loaded a couple for you, such as a door opening, right? Maybe I need a door opening, right? Not necessarily a door. Revit doesn't care. They're the same thing, at least in Revit standard. Revit thinks a door opening is essentially a door without the door part, just the threshold, just the opening. So again, it's already graphically showing it in a graphic view. It's already even showing dashed lines above us, indicating that there is a door frame essentially above us, and of course no poche. And yeah, it is a game changer. I can move this thing around, I can click on it, I can edit the type, which by the way, this is why I like ArchiCAD more, is because I can immediately just change this in real time and it's going to change my family. Revit says, nah. In fact, I want you to make a different component for every time you have a different door. So in my case, I have a door opening of 36 by 84, and I would literally need to duplicate another one in order to make a different door. So in my case, maybe I want an 8-foot opening, so I'd have to go with a 96 inches. Yes, this requires that I know a lot about my design already, which again, in Studio, you don't. So again, maybe a 5-foot opening. Oh, what is 5 feet in inches? 60 inches by literally 96. I literally have to make something new every time that I want something new, which is again why Revit isn't useful in Studio. But again, not to beat a dead horse. In my case, I do want to change that height to 8 feet by 5 feet. So I literally have to change this family, apply, and press OK. By the way, it is going to change every single family in the model. So just so you get that clear. And as you can see, it's already in the way of this door. So I might want to rehost it or pick a new wall for it to be on. And yeah, that's Revit in a nutshell, right? I can also press spacebar and go through a configuration of all those different things. So that is pretty useful. Again, not so much for studio, but really for a construction process. And yeah, if I move the wall, it definitely moves the door. A plus in some cases, terrible in other cases, but you'll know exactly what I mean and remember these very words when you work on your first Revit project. But that's actually looking pretty sweet, at least in terms of small kitchens go. Now why it has a door and this, well, maybe I want, I don't know, an opening to a pantry. I mean, why not? I can use the blue dots when I see them, and I can rehost things in order to be something much more of like a pantry style thing. No, it only opens in a 90-degree angle unless I loaded a different door. Sorry. I've made some certain doors along the way that I've basically added certain things to where you can change the angles, but I don't think I added it to this one. My bad. In my case, I could go with a crazy pivot door, but I don't recommend that for a pantry door, huh? In my case, I thought I loaded actually a double door for you guys, but no, I just got the garage and just a couple of useful doors. Oh, I did. Thank God. So I did make a swing angle for you. Yes, by the way, you literally have to make every component in Revit, which I'm not going to go over necessarily for this final project. But yeah, if you do kind of want to show a door happening, if you will, kind of slightly open, it is possible. And we do that a lot in our drawings. But that's looking pretty good for a small kitchen. And like I said, I was actually focused on the stairs. So yeah, I think I'm going to take advantage of this weird kind of interesting space in order to make some stairs and obviously some sort of foyer. Should probably just line that up. AL. I don't know. I'm kind of OCD as well, so I like when things line up like that. But obviously, if I just move the wall, it's going to move everything that's with that wall too. So again, it's not a very intuitive program. You think that you're just going to move a wall. Next thing you know, you're like deleting your entire project. Now I'm going to do my best to honestly make some mistakes on purpose, but we'll get there when we get there, so that you know how to fix them. Another thing that we can add, not just doors for DR, so keep in mind I'm hitting DR to actually add some doors, and it's immediately going to that door component. However, you can also go to just architecture and click on door. The next thing I could do is window, so WN as in Wood Nancy, I guess. I can't think of anything there. You immediately go into the window category. So if you go to architecture and go to window, obviously goes directly to window, and same, I've definitely uploaded some windows for you. But again, if you want some special windows, you literally have to edit the family and make some windows. So in my case, maybe I want one at the front. I don't know, I'm gonna go with like a fixed window, pretty large. I'm gonna go with like a 48 by 12. That's looking pretty sweet. And again, I'm just kind of ballparking them, not really being too specific with it. After all, I can move these things. I do want a small window. In fact, I had a design professor that went by the name of Professor Anna Sterner, who said that all architecture, every single room, should have at least access to daylight. And what a good rule to follow in design, because I can think of actually some 1972 houses that literally don't have windows. In fact, I can think of a CAC building where literally the interior core of classrooms had no windows. Now it makes sense for a jury room, not so much for an introduction to architecture, literally trying to talk and teach about daylight in a room that has no windows. Guadalupe knows what I mean. She remembers that room. So in our case, yes, even our kitchen should have a window, and that's probably where the sink is going to go, if not maybe even a very unique situation. I've done this before actually, an oven that had a window access to it. And it is pretty interesting and great for ventilation. But funny enough, people ask, what did we do before AC? Well, we actually had smart buildings that actually ventilated. Anyway, I don't know, we're actually getting dumber. when it comes to architecture or technology. We think that being additive or adding smart technology or Wi-Fi, for goodness sake, is helping us, when actually it kills our plants. If you were to put a Wi-Fi router next to a plant, you'd instantly know what I mean. So imagine what it's doing to your body. Anyway, I digress. But in our case, let's switch to stairs. We know how to make some windows, and just to kind of show you what that's doing, keep in mind that it's immediately, putting it on the first story. And as you can see, these windows are movable. As soon as I use my up arrows and or move them, we can literally decide where they go, and we can really lock in their heights by literally telling them via properties exactly where they go to. Keep in mind, it's not a design program. It's literally a catalog, if you will. But that's maybe digressing it too much. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. We got about 30 minutes left. There's a lot to pack in, as you can see. We've just talked about doors, windows, and honestly editing only a couple of items. So in our case, floor plan, let's continue and make some stairs. We'll go to the architecture tab, and you'll see that there's actually a stair icon. In my case, it's moved a little bit, and it is right next to ramps. In my case, I'll click on stair, and as you can see, we have a couple of options. Please, for the love of God, don't choose a spiral stair. I know, everybody wants to do one. However, it's all fun and games until you have to take a couch up a spiral stair. Yeah, I know none of you have done it. That's why, that's a huge reason why we don't have spiral stairs is furniture. Literally trying to take furniture up a spiral stair, and it doesn't meet fire code in many cases. Yeah, imagine somebody trying to escape a fire and they just fall. Anyway, horrible instances, but you'd be surprised how many people lose their lives because of spiral stairs. Again, maybe not the greatest PSA, but anyway, let's talk about some stairs. Yes, you can make a spiral stair, and yes, it's arguably the easiest thing to do in the world in Revit. I literally just have to click between two buttons. And as you can see, it's automatically doing a lot of the calculations for us, but it's based, again, on a family property. And yes, I've loaded a couple for you. A precast stair, a monolithic stair, and whatever west stairs are. Actually, it came from a big family. So that one just looks the coolest. So I'm going to go with a west stair. And as you can see, we have to decide some things such as the base level and how high we are off the base level and which level we're going to. So I can't just start making stairs. I need to have established levels. I need to have established walls. Again, not a design program. But as you can see, I can go from first floor to second floor. I can go first floor to third floor, right? I can really calculate all of those things on really just clicking a button. But in our case, I'm going to go to the second story. And as soon as I click, I'm going to go with a straight stair, by the way. There's even more options. I can start with an exterior support to the right, to the left, or even on the center. In my case, I'm going to start with it on the right. Just because I want to start here and go up essentially there to my second story. So I'm going to start here, and quite literally, it starts calculating. It literally starts lining up things for you. It literally gives you the dimensions. It's very cool. But in my case, as you can see, I'm going to run into some issues with my wall. So I do need to make a landing. Yes, it does that automatically for you too. So in my case, I'm going to go up just a couple of steps, and immediately it's actually even telling you right here how many steps and risers you actually have left. So 8 risers created, and of course 11 remaining till I get to that second story. So I'm going to click here and it's go, okay, great. Where do you want to start next? In my case, I'm going to start on that wall again, and I kind of want to start from this point, so I'm just going to kind of fake it till I make it and start there. As you can see, it's going to automatically make that landing for us, and of course continue the stairs. As you can see, I'm really getting close there. I kind of like the opening in the back. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cool. I'm gonna go for it. Let's press OK. And as you can see, bam, just like that, it graphically did all the work for us and even teaches us. How many of you guys wondered in design or graphics too, where the hell the brake goes? I sure did in graphics too. And yes, there is a lot of appeal, especially to Design 1 and Design 2 students. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to save so much time. I can be on Instagram and Facebook all I want now. No, that is not the case. As you can see, it's stuck in stone. If I want to just move that back and get rid of that space, I got to draw it all over again. Either that or just pray that I can double click on this and move it, which by the way, isn't exactly easy. It's all together and it's all drawn in one piece. And I make that example because again, as I've said before, it's not built for design. It's built for something that is already designed. It's built so that I can give actually my schematic stuff, the stuff that we do, I can hand it over to an intern, and their job is to make it in Revit. Does that make sense? Honestly, that was one of my third jobs that I did for an MEP engineer. I was the architect guy who understood Revit. So literally my job was to take CAD drawings and turn them into Revit models. Honestly, it got pretty monotonous. Don't get me wrong, I got really good at Revit that way, but you know, not exactly what I wanted to be in architecture for. To be a CAD monkey is what they call us. Now that term has slowly become racial, so they stopped saying it, but the older guys, they still call us CAD monkeys. So if you've ever heard that term, that is what they're referring to. Somebody who basically just works in the computer, which by the way, if you wanted to do that, you don't have to go to school, by the way. You could just start learning CAD and get a job, right? And there are people who do, that you meet at the firm and you go, hey, what school do you go to? And they're, I just started CAD at a high school. And don't get me wrong, they make great money, $35 an hour, but they never progress out of that. And another thing that's really dangerous to be said and to look out for is don't ever be doing the same job for more than a year, right? Don't be that guy in the studio, right? Always be expanding on what you learned in school, that you are a designer, that you are a worker, and that you are a critical thinker about design. Now, again, that's only if I guess you consider yourself a designer. But anyway, back to the stairs. As you can see, it does make a lot of things for us, and it is very, very cool. But at the same time, it's not going to do everything magically for you. In fact, you'll notice at the second story, or if we go to our quote-unquote clipping plane, you'll see that, well, it doesn't automatically make the hole for us, and yes, you will need to click on the stairs itself and actually make that hole for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my top view, and you can do that, and well, as you can see, I can actually make quite a bigger hole open to the ground, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw that first. So I'm going to kind of maintain that perpendicular angle, and would you look at that, it even wants to do that for me. So I'm going to maintain that angle and get pretty close. As you can see, one of the first things that is very different in Revit is the trim button. It's TR for the shortcut, TR. Literally, it's very weird. You just click the keyboard and you'll see that the cursor changes, right? That's literally the only feedback we get in Revit, and it's unfortunate. But in our case, the way that it works is we want to click on the things that we want to keep. So I want to keep this line, and I want to keep this side of the line. So it's going to chop it off there. I want to keep this side and keep this side, and it's not going to do anything. Well, that's because this is a completely separate line, and that's a completely separate line. So I'm going to select both of those and of course delete them. You'll see that if I don't delete them, in fact, I'll get an error message that says, hey, you got these weird lines. In fact, you got this situation right here that has extra, and it needs a closed polyline. So in my case, I'm going to continue. I like how it always has like an exit option. It's just like has a crash out option at all times. But that's looking more or less like the hole that I actually want to have for my stairs. So I'll click OK, and as you can see, it immediately actually fixes it for us. And now we actually have a pretty useful situation. And if you have a toddler, you have a terrible situation. They're going to fall immediately, right? So one of the things that we can do is, of course, continue this rail. And funny enough, you can double click on that rail, and you'll see that it doesn't have one over here, right? And if we view it from the top, that yes, it wants you to literally draw one, right? And as you can see, I can continue that drawing and basically add it on. Now, funny enough, I don't think they're allowed to cross. Actually, let's find out. I kind of wonder. I don't think so. Yeah. Oh, wow! It did it. So, 2026. How about that? So they can cross now, which is great because I can take that all the way to the wall. And as you can see, I got to take these really tiny blue buttons. And yeah, as you can see, a lot of stuff starts to highlight as you move, trying to literally help you. And yes, it is going to ask you to save every time you do something big. But right off the bat, I mean, we're already talking stairs. So again, there's some pretty great things to it. And as you can see, it's a very dark space. And you can get rid of things that say you don't need, or you can change their families. So for instance, if you had more guardrails or you had a different railing system, you can immediately change those families or quite literally delete them, especially if you don't need them. But in my case, I actually do. So because I have that gap space.
What if you wanted to change it partially, like have that guardrail but then not have the guardrails along the wall?
You could. So if you double click this, you can get rid of just that piece, delete. And you'll see it does need to be connected. So I don't think you can have floating pieces. You would just need to make another one, which is a really good question. Like for instance, I could delete pieces, right? But if I wanted to say add them back, that's where it gets a little tricky. I can't just, well, you know, it is 2026. That might have changed. I might be able to add them back. Let's see what that does. I have a feeling, oh, okay, it still hosts to the piece. So, I mean, again, you just draw it back. Now, if I wanted to actually draw that as a separate piece, though, like maybe I didn't want it obviously right there, but then I wanted it to continue, I would just actually go back to my architecture rails. So, railing, and actually have to draw that. So let's just go ahead and draw that to answer Brandon's question. Great question, by the way. Keep them coming. That's exactly what I mean by a good question. And by default, it actually might go to the floor, right, like that. So I'll click on it and I'll say pick a new host because I want to host it to something, and I'll host it to my stairs, and immediately goes right to the stairs. And again, like I was mentioning in part 1, everything in this program works as a host model, except the floors and the walls. Those can be actually made just kind of magically in the air. But everything else kind of is bound by some sort of physical aspect like gravity or constraints of proportions and things like this. Like for instance, glass. It won't make a football-sized field glass because it'll tell you, hey, where the hell are you going to get that, bro? You know, like it's trying to be realistic in a construction situation. That way somebody in a real situation of 500 people working on a project, they don't accidentally do something that is impossible. So, fantastic question. Thank you, Brandon. Let's get some windows in there. So I'm going to hit WN, and by the way, you can put in windows at like any view, and as you can see, it's like trying to help us, right, a little bit. All right, it's even like conforming to the walls, and again, it's conforming to the hosts that are found in the project. So in my case, I'm going to get a big window in there. I don't know, I kind of want the 36 by 60. Boom, there we go. And again, I'm kind of just placing them as placeholders because I'd want to dial them in the right places. This is actually looking like a pretty good bedroom, so let's go to, oh no, where's my second floor? So let's, just like how we have a first floor view, which by the way is looking fantastic, let's get some dimension lines on there. So in my case, like I said, I think I did this last time, but you can use the tab button to essentially flip through the multiple blue lines that you may or may not want to use. You'll see that I'm using the stud position, which by the way you probably won't learn until masters, but that you have multiple layers in your walls, and most of us know this if you've ever constructed anything in terms of a house. But yeah, it's never a bad idea to dimension things. You know, it makes things look very finished, which is, again, by the way, what this program is for. It's for finished projects. Which, if you've ever heard Escamilla talk about design, he says we never finish a project, right? It's true. But that's looking pretty sweet. So let's get our second floor, but as you can see, we don't have a second floor. If we right click on the floor plans, there's no option to just add a floor. So that is actually found in our view tab. So if you go to view and you go to plan views and we go to floor plan, we can actually, add some of those other views. In my case, my second floor, and press OK. And yes, by default, it's already there. It's amazing. It knows that from that little level that we established in the elevation. Sorry, there's a lot of talking in part 2. There's a reason why I record this, and hopefully it is recording. Let's make sure. Thank goodness it is. Anyway. Because like I said, don't get me wrong, I'm not the only person who teaches this, and to be fair, there are really long, extensive classes. I mean, you can go to LinkedIn classes and get a whole free with your EDU account some Revit tutorials, and they're really good. They're slow, but you know, this is our definitely 2-week method of Revit. However, in my case, as you can see, I've got some numbers in the way of my site. Kind of want those out of the way, or I can hide them. I can hit HH to hide something real quick. Keep in mind, when I open Revit again, it comes right back. But lo and behold, I have, again, the graphics of how I would show this in my Graphics 2 class. I can't tell you how many times that I'll start actually a project in Revit for Studio. I'll get to about right here and print it out so that I can draft on top of it and make changes. But again, what's really nice is it has everything for me figured out. So again, the program can teach you too. Yes, Brandon?
About printing, I mean, is the process similar to the Rhino, or is it just
Very similar. We make like essentially a PDF, but it's based on the sheets. So we'll definitely get there in part 3.
Okay.
So definitely a good question. But yeah, we'll get to printing and talk about Cube PDF Writer and everything like that. But let's keep going. Let's keep making some rooms. And as you can see, if I accidentally move this one, guys, it's actually going to move that wall underneath. So I might need to make a new wall. Obviously, I don't want to move all the floor plan walls that I just did. In fact, if I go back to floor plan, it's going, hey, you can't do that. There's a door in the way. This is the real problem with Revit. I'm always trying to do something, try to make some changes for my design studio, and I can't. Literally can't. Literally, it says, hey, don't do that. So it'll stay there, but literally gives you a message every time. So I'm going to change this to be, instead of unconnected, what am I going to do? I'm going to switch it to my second floor. Now it's going to stay here in my first floor plan, but if I go to my second floor plan, voila, it's gone. It's now top constrained to that wall. And just to explain that, you can actually take a look for yourself. Get, of course, the section view and take a look, which again is a game changer, right? And I use clipping plane all the time, to be honest, in Revit, or in Rhinoceros as well, because it is just so much easier to go back and forth, and I can actually take these walls and actually reconstrain them. So you can actually attach them with a button and click literally on the floor itself. In my case, it's still unconnected, so it's not going to do anything. So I'm just going to move that to second floor, and let's go ahead and move that to second floor as well. Like I said, not a design program, but let's make a bedroom and a bathroom. I mean, I need some of those, and there's kind of a little sitting space over here. You know, honestly, a lot of potential going on here. So I'm going to hit WA for wall and just keep going. I need more stairs to go up to the next floor, so I might actually end up copying this exact stair. It's kind of working. Oh, but I can't, because my first level's 12 feet. And my second floor was 10 feet. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not a problem for Revit, but something that honestly sometimes we overlook in design, no? How many of you guys calculate the stairs every time you design a stair? Yeah, me neither. Sometimes we're just like drawing stairs and scratching some stairs. I'll calculate it later. That is not for Revit. Revit doesn't want to calculate it later. It wants to make it now, right? So keep those kinds of things in mind, because it is something to get used to in Revit. It's a hard program. It takes a different mindset to work in this program, which is often maybe why it's hard for beginning studio. But let's make some walls. Let's have some fun. Let's design a little bit. I think I want my room to kind of match that like diagonal thing going on there. I mean, why not? And I do want it to align, but as you can see, it's not like finding it magically. So I'm just gonna kind of fake it till I make it and go with something more or less like this. I don't know. You can also align something to get that angle. So I'll do AL, and then I'll essentially just line up to this tool. Now it's gonna freak out when I do this. It's gonna go, hey, you can't do that. That's okay. I'm just gonna unjoin them real quick. Oh man, see, this is what I mean. You can't just like do things in Revit. That's okay. I'm gonna draw a line instead. Here's the secrets. Draw a line instead and trace that line, and then just move it. So I hit DL for draw detail line is what that stands for. And now I'm just gonna align to the detail line. Again, just so that I can maintain that angle. So So line up to this and tell that to line up to it. And then of course just delete the line that I don't need. So not too shabby. Sorry, this break line's in the way. So again, some really cool stuff is you can like break lines out of the way, and that's actually how you're supposed to traditionally show a section. At least that's the way that I learned, is you don't show the middle line inside there. That's just me. I know in studio we just get a line all the way through, but traditionally you're actually supposed to show it like that. Anyway, I digress, but I do find it nice that Revit at least knows about our traditions. So but that being the case, I think I'm going to go with a bathroom on this side. And it's going to be a funky situation. So let's get some doors. And I'm going to go with, see, oh wow, that's actually really useful because I'm going to immediately know that I can't open my door here. So that's very useful. And I'm going to go with maybe a pocket door for my other. So let's go with like a pocket door situation. Sweet. That's looking pretty sweet. Not too shabby. And of course I'm just using my arrow keys to kind of dial some things in. You'll notice that you can move it on the wall. You can't like move it out the wall though. It is attached to the wall. So there is that. And as you can see, nothing's post-shade. Well, why? We'll talk about that of course, and we'll talk actually about how Revit tries to be Illustrator too. It tries to be Illustrator, Rhinoceros, AutoCAD, and it ends up being pretty mediocre at honestly all three of them. But we'll get to that in part 3. But this is a very unuseful space. It's probably, if I gave it a design critique, it's where the cats go to sleep. And I don't know, maybe I make that for the cat. But yeah, kind of unused space there going up, but that's okay for today. Maybe we actually take advantage of that weirdness and make a closet as well. Or maybe it's a very cool bathroom. I don't know. But as you can see, it doesn't really want a different allowance. Right? In fact, it's going to go, whoa, you're disconnecting a wall? How dare you? I won't even let you do that. You'll literally have to make a new wall every time you kind of want to do something a little different. So for instance, maybe that's how I get rid of that space, if you will. Right? By essentially poching it, covering it up, right? As if it didn't exist. So I could theoretically do something like that. I could also do SL for split. I can split a wall in half into 2, so SL. And yes, you do have to like click on the wall. And that can be pretty useful, especially if you're trying to do something cool. By the way, TR or trim does work on walls too, so that is pretty sweet. Not gonna lie, I use that a lot. So it is theoretically possible to change stuff. It's just, as you can see, it's like, dude, I could just draw this in 30 seconds, right? Rather than, again, try to make things work for Revit. But just to throw it out there, yes, you can still technically design, right? I'm just using my arrow keys to basically move some stuff around. And being a good architect that I am, of course I'm going to need a chase space as well for the mechanical and, of course, air conditioning. Not that you guys are ever really worried about that stuff, but it is a real reality, especially in San Antonio. And I'm going to need a chase, so I'm just going to go ahead and make one. And since I'm drawing a hole inside of a bigger plan, it's essentially going to make a hole, right? So I no longer see the floor there. And yes, it's now going to start to be a little bit more true of the architecture itself. I know it's getting dense, guys. Hang in there with me. We're going to at least get to the roof today. We've already gone over stairs, some windows, dialing some certain things in. And relatively speaking, I do want to put in some objects, so let's talk about that next, such as a bed. I think I actually added a bed for you guys. Let's go back to floor plan. Floor plan number 2, it's got my bedroom and maybe my master bedroom at the very top. So that's looking pretty sweet. For components, you can also go to architecture and then go to component. Another way to do it is actually just type in CM, again for component, I guess. But as you can see, I loaded like a TV, some tubs, obviously a water closet, some sinks, some pendant lights, just a lot of stuff that I had randomly in this file. And honestly, I have thousands of these, right, that I've just saved over time. I've got a couch in there for you. That way you don't have to spend your entire time for this project just looking up items that either work or don't work. And another place that you can actually find them is I've mentioned before on BIM object. So again, instead of say rhinoceros, switch to Revit and type in doors. In fact, you'll find thousands of realistic doors. It's great. Now keep in mind, you're going to find every door known to man. And what's great about this is it's like a catalog. It's like opening up that magazine back in 1975 and you'd pick a catalog and you'd mail the numbers and you'd pay for it and they'd send you the item. It was great. It was the Amazon before Amazon. But essentially BIM object works like that as well. And what's nice is that all these doors actually come from the manufacturer. So it's really great. If the client ends up liking that door, I can purchase one and order that exact door for them and know that it's going to work for this model. Again, it's a huge game changer for construction, not necessarily for design. But as you can see, I can download, say, this really cool slider door. I can go to download. Of course, you do have to sign up with a free account and make sure that you select Revit because, yeah, there's a lot of Revit stuff. And by the way, you don't need an IFC, you don't need materials and textures, and all you essentially need is an RFA, which stands for a Revit Family Assembly. My bad. But as you can see, we can get a lot of different Revit files, and let's just go ahead and download that so that you know how to put it in. In my case, I'm just going to put it on the desktop for now, and of course save that. In my case, I'll switch over to here. And yeah, if it's already loaded, obviously you'll just click on the piece in question. So like say a queen size bed. And yeah, it is only one size. That's kind of great because it teaches you immediately how big something is. And you can immediately start spatially doing something for it. It also immediately starts kind of blocking out the floor for you. Again, there are some nice things about it. Again, I'll hit CM and go back to component and maybe make some side desks. I think I did put some side desks in here. Little tables. Could have swore I put little tables for you guys. No, that's a big table. There's a side table. All right. So we got a little side table, little side table. Sweet. We're talking business now. We got a TV. Most people have a TV in their room. I like to not to because I hear like a very tiny high-pitched noise coming from it at night, so it freaks me out. Anyway, too much information. Let's get a chair in there. Why not? Can we fit a chair? Who knows? On today's episode of Will a Chair Fit? And in my case, will it even show up? Oh, there it is. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. Let's find out why. Because you might run into that as very well. In fact, you'll find out that there's a mode, this little light bulb down here, that if you click on it, it'll immediately show you everything in the entire project. And I'm not sure actually why by default it's not showing. Well, let's switch it to fine. That might be it. Oh, and it is. Obviously, you should always switch your mode of view to a fine mode rather than coarse or medium. It's always going to show you the definition, and that's again to reduce CPU usage. Obviously, if you're working on a skyscraper, and your CPU is like trying to get every single couch, it's not great. So you can set it to coarse and it'll get rid of the couches. That way that you can start moving the model. Anyway, it's very confusing, but it is useful in a large scale project. In my case, I'm going to turn off that light bulb mode. And as you can see, this is not the chair. It is just not going to fit. However, I could actually extend my walls, but as you can see, Revit is, well, going to be okay with it. And it is going to affect my bottom floor, so again, I can't just move stuff. Be very careful. And that is going to increase the size of my pantry. So again, it's not going to move everything, but it tries. It definitely tries. But we can see how to add an object, and we can see how to load an object. If I go to CM, I can go to this button right here that says Load Family. That is where I will take in, are you looking for content? No. Let's go to my computer, let's go to my desktop, and of course get that download that I just did, doors, and you'll see it usually gives you a preview here, maybe not on my Parallels desktop, but if I hit OK, it's going to immediately update it from a 2018 Revit model to a 2026 model, and it's going to actually open it up usually as a new tab, or it might directly just import it, which would be very lucky, because not everything directly imports. Especially if it's a different version or not made in 2026. And as you can see, it has a problem, go figure, right? And in our case, it's going, hey, We actually have some weird parameter problems. It happens to do with the cannot be loaded. Let's just try and say yes anyway. In fact, it still doesn't want to do it. What do we do? Well, let's open it separately as a file itself. So yeah, we can open up projects, but we can actually open up the family itself. So in my case, I'm going to open up that family and go back to doors. And this, of course, should open it no matter what. If it doesn't open it here, then it might not be the best file. Now, you shouldn't have any problems with BIM object. However, the second one I'm going to show you, you will run into a problem with some of these models because they're extremely old and they're made by you and me, right? Not the manufacturer. But from here, this is actually looking pretty good. And that is more or less the door that I was looking for. You always kind of want to verify those things. You'll see something that says load into project. Let's see if that will work first. We're going to go ahead and load that into the project. And we're probably going to get that same error, but let's make sure. Hey, we didn't get the same error. So again, sometimes they just load as a component, sometimes they don't because they're in the wrong category. Keep in mind, you can't load a window inside of a door category. You can't load a door inside of a window category. But in your first time in Revit, sometimes it's easier to just open up the family and load it in manually. Because again, sometimes trying to find that right category, especially the first time, is very hard, right? And often, I can't tell you how many times I just go to the family menu, go find the category, and add it to that family. But it's a complex program, and to be fair, there are a couple different ways to do things, so I'm going to chalk it up as confusing. But in our case, as you can see, it immediately goes into a door mode, so I can immediately start putting a door. And if I do want a sliding door at the very front, as you can see, I'm going to need a thicker wall. So I can click on that wall immediately, and of course even change it to, in my case, accidentally thinner, to a metal stud wall. Bam! Right? And as you can see, it doesn't want me to do that because it's like, hey, your dimension lines are no longer correct. Yeah, that's okay. Right? Relax, Revit. But as you can see, you can immediately do some of these things, but not extremely important, at least for today's tutorial. Last but not least, let's put a roof on this guy. That way we can call it a day with this long tutorial. But as you can see, I'm trying to make an entire building in the span of 3 videos, so it's not exactly doable, but I'm trying. So in our case, let's make sure we got our second floor. Let's go ahead and get a roof plan. I may want to change that actually to a roof level, so in my case, I'm going to go back to my section. And instead of a 4th floor, let's go ahead and call that roof plan. Roof plan. Sweet. Once I do that, it's actually going to change anything else that is connected to this level. Also, my levels are starting to get really close to that, and I think it's because of the scale. Yeah, let's go to a 1/4 scale. And as you can see, yes, everything got smaller, but everything stays the same. Kind of like that rectangle method I keep telling you about, right? They really are all connected, and scale starts to be your forte. Anyway. But in my case, I do have a roof plan, and more or less, kind of want to maybe lower that roof a little bit. It's kind of getting tall. I think my top floor should maybe be about 9 feet. But if it is the master, I don't know. Maybe we go to a 12 feet. That is pretty cool. Not gonna lie. Maybe the guest bedroom, if you will, is on the middle floor. Anyway, let's get a roof in there. So let's get the floor itself first, right? We need to go to View, Plan Views, and of course go to Floor. In my case, I'm going to go to Roof Plan, double click, or just press OK. And yeah, there's nothing there. Oh my God, sir, what do I do? Right? I can't tell you how many times I've struggled in this position. First thing, well, let's switch it to Fine instead of Coarse. So just to make sure that there's nothing being hidden by the CPU usage. The next thing I can do is, of course, hit the light bulb, see if I'm missing anything. Not missing anything. So the next thing that I can do is actually my view range. You'll see that in the viewport itself, it actually has view range. It even actually has what is called depth clipping, not death clipping, right? Anyway, funny mistake there. But in my case, I need to change the view range, and I may even need to change the range base level underlay. So I mean, that's really cool. And to be fair, what's nice is now you can you can like hover over these things, and it immediately tries to tell you what it's doing. And it's basically just establishing the view range itself, basically going, hey, do you want to show some of the floors you have in between? Or so for instance, maybe I'm at the top floor, but I need to show the bottom floor for some god-awful reason. And I can actually do that, right? In AutoCAD, I would just take that floor and put it in there, right? But in Revit, they're like, you can't do anything outside the parameters of this program. And so they literally add a new feature for it, and it just makes this program much more complex and argumentatively unuseful. But in my case, there is a new option called underlay, and yes, you can switch this to, say, second floor, and it's immediately going to show you what's underneath. So that's really great, especially if I'm trying to draw the roof plan. So yeah, I've got a pretty weird roof, and keep in mind I can't click on anything. It's not editable, it's just a layer. Anyway, just so that it's explained a little bit. But let's say the view range itself, I do want to maybe show some of those walls. I could highlight over view range real quick and see if that pops up. It might not pop up with this video. Let's see. That one actually has a pretty cool diagram showing you what each of those levels mean. So as you guys know, a floor plan is a section cut of a certain level, right? Between two levels, and you can set those things in Revit. This is a really confusing way to simply just show a clipping plane, which is why I teach rhinoceros first, because if I taught that first, you guys would be like, I hate architecture, right? This is so confusing. Are you serious? Is this what my life is supposed to be in 10 years? Well, if you want to work in an office and only do Revit, then sure. There's some people who do love it. I mean, there's nothing against that, but it is a confusing program. But that being the case, I can control that as well, and quite literally control the section cut myself. So just throwing it out there, and let's get this to a formidable scale. Sweet. Let's make a roof. It is somewhat simple. I'll go to the architecture tab and literally click, excuse me, I got the hiccups, on roof. And as you can see, we can do a lot of different things. That gutter, everybody probably knows what a gutter is. A fascia board, that was the quiz question of the day. A soffit, anybody know what a soffit is? And if you don't get me wrong, it's going to try and teach you what that is and at least how to use it in Revit. But again, this shouldn't be what teaches you architecture. Your professor should, right? Of course, be teaching you these things in class, and you should ask them, hey, what is a fascia board? What is a soffit? What do you call that? Because essentially everything in architecture does have vocabulary. But in our case, we're just going to start from scratch and click on it and just start drawing. So in my case, I'm going to get funky with the spices and just give ourselves a little overhang here. I'm going to go with what is called a shed roof design eventually, but I do want to show you at least how to make the cookie cutter roof, what I call it, and you'll notice why we have such ugly architecture in America. It's thanks to Revit, which brings me to a bigger principle of why we shouldn't use it. However, you're going to get some professors that go, no, we should only use Revit. And you're going to get professors that say, don't you dare install that program. Or you'll get the professors like me that go, well, it's a necessary evil. No matter how you look at it, everybody's got an opinion about Revit. So again, not trying to change any ideologies here. If you're learning Revit for the first time with me, you're welcome. I'm at least probably the most unbiased, right? I'm literally using it and teaching it right now, and I'm telling you at least what it's actually used for in architecture. But as you can see, I'm making some dimensions, and that becomes really useful because as you can see, I just kind of sketched it. I didn't really kind of dial anything in. And most of all, especially once you start getting into a firm, you'll start to realize that in a residential setting, that a 3-foot overhang is about the max that you can do, and that you normally actually only choose that in one direction. So for instance, all my long overhangs I'm going to go with 3 feet, and my short overhangs I'm going to go with 2. Again, not imperative that you absolutely know that, but these are the kind of things that you just kind of pick up by nature when you're working in a firm for years and years and years. But what's nice is that you can dial these in by simply just clicking, and I find that to be way easier than trying to draw that accurately. That seems so silly to kind of sit there and try and draw it one by one accurately when you can literally just draw it all and then just change the numbers. So again, arguably, I think my way is way easier, and the way that I was taught. So by default, once I have this and I click OK, yeah, it definitely makes a roof. Let's see what it looks like. Oh God, a flat roof. Everybody knows that doesn't actually exist in architecture. Why? Because it'll leak. The water's got to go somewhere. In fact, in most states, by default, it needs to have at least a 1-inch slope. So let's go ahead and do that. As you can see, I'll have to double click on it again. And let's go with the cookie cutter. Let's see what it performs with. We'll get that, and as you can see, it gets the dimension lines too. So I can do filter and undo the dimensions. That way, again, I can get actually the properties that I want. In my case, I'm going to make sure that this defines slope. So yes, it's a little toggle box, and you hit it, and it suddenly is all in slope. And you press OK, and suddenly you've got, you know, the house from Home Alone. Very cookie cutter mansion style home. Let's take off the section box, and yes, the Smurfs are just dying to live there tomorrow. Anyway, as you can see, I'm making fun of this roof, and as you can see, as soon as we start defining the slope, we get all the ridge edges, and it calculates that automatically, which is great if you're a developer or a contractor. It is not great if you're a designer who wants actually something quite specific. In fact, you'll see that you can still change these, and you can dial them in as well. And yeah, that is a game changer for somebody who's a contractor building cookie cutter houses. This is like, oh my gosh, the bee's knees to them, because they no longer have to hire an architect to calculate these things, which, by the way, we were calculating in the 90s in a very professional way. So thanks a lot, Revit. Anyway, as you can see, it's not great. It's not pretty. So let's make it so. In my case, let's take off some of the definitions of slope. So in my case, I'm going to take this one off, this one, that one, and that one. Well, let's leave that one. Let's take off that one. So in my case, I'm going to uncheck define slope and see what that produces. Anyway, it's definitely different, but as you can see, it's a post-diction. It's a predetermination based off of those, not only the sketch, but also the definitions of slopes. Keep in mind that as soon as I delete some of those things, you'll see that it no longer makes certain areas for those things, and a god-awful roof. And let's face it, we've all seen that in a cookie cutter situation, right? Your house may have this. I am so sorry for making fun of your house, but don't worry, my house has terrible situations too. You gotta love the architects of yesterday. Anyway, but as you can see, it is not a great situation and not what we want. So in my case, I'm going to turn off the slope and be a little bit more specific. So I'm going to turn off the dimensions, press apply, and undefined slope and redefine slope. And I just want a simple shed roof that is actually maybe going towards my balcony. That seems actually kind of nice. I kind of want maybe a taller balcony area and kind of slope my roof down. Very architectural if you ask me. So I'm going to go with define slope for just this piece. And you'll see what that does. Anyway, it makes it very large based on, again, the definition of slope. So right now the slope is at a ridiculous angle, and I'm going to go with 1 inch to 12, which is, yes, the same as a ramp. And that's looking pretty sweet, at least relatively postmodern, if you will. And by the way, I've got like this weird gap space. Now, I don't need to necessarily fill that in with a wall. In my case, I'm going to actually select all my walls, attach my walls to a certain item. Hopefully this one. Nope, doesn't want it. Maybe I've actually got too much selected, so I'm going to go to my filter, make sure that I only have walls, and I do. And, oh, my top constraint varies, eh? So it's not going to necessarily attach. It might, though. So let's see if I can attach top again. Oh, it's highlighted, and voila, does the magic for us. And what's really great about that is if I change the slope later, it's actually going to change my walls as well. So again, very useful in a construction document situation. Maybe not exactly what I want in a studio, but for now, that is where I will end today's conversation. Obviously, next time we'll continue a little bit with the roof, and we'll get into actually more of how to set up the actual sheets, the prints, the drawings, and some of the cool stuff that we can do without taking this to Illustrator, And I will show you the options of how we get this into Illustrator and Photoshop if that's actually what we want to do. And we'll lastly go over perspective next time as well. So again, we'll come back from Thanksgiving ready to hit the ground running. And as you can tell, there's a lot to do in Revit, and I do apologize for going extremely fast, but it's the only way to make it fit in an hour and 15-minute video. So without further ado, before I end the video, are there any great questions like Brandon was asking earlier? Any questions at all? Seriously, do not be afraid to. I'd love to get it recorded. That way it can help the whole class, and arguably especially the ones that aren't here today. They're going to be real struggling, sweating bullets like, holy crap, this is a new program and it's not working like Rhino. That's right. However, remember, I gave you the right tools. You actually know one of the most universal programs of all time, Rhinoceros. And keep in mind that Revit is for construction documents. Fake it till you make it. Nobody's expecting you to make this or to have any design critique on it tomorrow. Again, it's so that we can understand and learn the very tricky program that is called Revit. No questions? Let's end it there for today. Let's go back to Mac. Woo!